This is HBR News number 378. Transgenderism won't protect you from conscription. Giving Viagra to Russians, where we reflect on the stories of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Those two stories are unrelated, by the way, so don't get any weird ideas about Russians and conscriptions and Viagra. So,
you say that now, but
yeah, right. I know. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all of this craziness so that it does not consume you. I am President-elect Brian, and I am joined by, as always, my austere patriarchs and our handmaiden, Hannah Wallen, Mike J, and Dr. Randercam. We have a.
I am not president-elect because women can't be president until a woman can run on something other than being a woman.
Yes, which is probably never. At least not in my lifetime. I just don't see it happening.
Well, since I don't plan on running, you're probably right.
Yeah, exactly.
I identify as president future elect. One day I'll be an immigrant and will be allowed to be president.
I mean, you guys have had a number of female prime ministers, but so
Mike, is this your attempt to take back the colonies?
Shut it down, the goyim, no.
All right, so we have a great show lineup for you guys today. So please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comments section. On this week's HBR News Show, we're going to be talking about, an interesting, perhaps, loophole, which allows the government to draft trans women into the military. A report that Russia is giving their soldiers Viagra so they will rape Ukrainians. And there's actually a couple more stories as well. So stick around. It's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. And what we're basically going to do today is we're just going to pick up from where we left off on the last patron show, where we were looking at this video from the Steve Harvey show called The Longest Dating Requirements List. And we only got about a third of the way through the video. So we'll probably just, finish it off if we can. And that'll be the content. I think
we're especially chatty. The list is just that long.
Yeah, it is a really long list. And I mean, I think it keeps growing like beyond what they've brought out, because they have like this giant monitor with a list of things, and then they had to bring out a kiosk with another screen with another list of things. And I think they're going to do that a couple of times. So
they're like those little snake fireworks that you used to do when you were a kid, and it was so exciting. It's like, I get to do fireworks, and all it does is grow and grow and grow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically that. So anyway, let's find out just how demanding this modern woman is with regards to what she wants in a man in the patron only show. We'll just have a little education session. We'll learn something about women, and hopefully it'll be very enlightening. So please consider joining us by becoming a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and setting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into the Discord, where you'll be able to watch all of the additional content, the after shows, and other things. Sometimes, like Allison has been diligently working on a piece of literature, and this is why she hasn't been active, for a little while, or at least not as active. But if you want to know what she's up to, then, please consider becoming a Badger, and you can talk to her in the after show, and she'd probably love to tell you all about it. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we have been yeeted from YouTube and all of the popular parts of the internet, then please go to badgerfeed.com or honeybadgerradio.com. That is where all of our stuff ends up. You can also follow us on Rumble, which we are currently live on right now. And I know that some people, they have problems with Rumble's interface. Like, you can't, the chat is hard to use and things like that. But I think that, if they're consistently growing, I think that they will add improvements. And hopefully, they'll be able to match YouTube on a more level playing field, but we got to help them grow. So, all right. Anyway, with all that said, I'm not working for Rumble. I didn't say this because they paid me or anything like that. I just like Rumble as a secondary streaming destination. I watch most of my videos on YouTube, so I'm not exactly like, perfect in that
I'd
regard.
honestly like to see more on Rumble, just because I would, if I could, I'd just watch it on Rumble instead.
Yeah.
YouTube has pissed me off in a number of ways, and I would love to just not.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoyed it when we did the salty cracker setup, where you do the first half of the show on YouTube and then you move it over to Rumble.
Yeah.
I wish we'd keep doing that. It's because that's how we slowly move over to what's inevitably going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not us, because we're not going to get yeeted. We're just going to get throttled slowly. But once we're completely throttled, we might as well move over. So we should prepare for the inevitable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually like when we would do like the first part of our show on YouTube and Rumble and everywhere else, and then we just turn off YouTube and continue. So we'd be on Rumble, Twitch, and some other places. I think we're on DLive and Facebook's streaming, although I don't know if we're still on that, because we might be like temporarily suspended or something, but we're still streaming there, so I don't know how that works. But yeah, so anyways, let's go ahead and get into the stories. Remember, it's badgerfeed.com, honeybadgerradio.com. That's where the content lives, and feedthebadger.com. I know it's confusing, but check them all out. So if you want to support us, go to Feed the Badger. Okay. So let's get into today's stories. We're going to be talking about the draft and and trans women. So I think that's right. Mike J, you could?
Oh, I will. In a move that was undoubtedly divorced from current global events, don't think about it. Who suggested that? Stop saying that. I know you're thinking it. It had nothing to do with that. The U.S. government's Selective Service Twitter account put out the following reminder a week and a half ago. Quote, "Parents, if your son is an only son and the last male in your family to carry the family name, he is still required to register with the Selective Service System. Learn more about who needs to register at blah 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 governmentlink.com.gov." End quote. Many Twitter users, especially those who were parents, scoffed at the tweet in the comments. One user commented, quote, "For the purpose of the Selective Service System, my son will identify as a girl starting with his 18th birthday. Checkmate, fascist." End quote. While another replied, quote, "My son's a girl now, so we good." End quote. Unfortunately, as it currently stands, male to female transsexuals, or those men who identify as female, non-binary, or anything other than male, still must sign up for the Selective Service System. But this could be changing in the future, though not for the better. In a statement given from the White House last September, they voiced their support for adding women to Selective Service as well, saying, quote, "The administration supports Section 513 and the registration requirement for all citizens, which further ensures a military selective service that is fair and just."
What I really should do right now is laugh like a drain for 5 minutes. I always suspected that the draft, would be the arena where we finally play out the royal rumble of victim culture. It was inevitable. Really. There can be only one, and all things must converge on the lineage of the one thing to rule us all, and in the darkness bind them. So who will win? Will it be the Whammons? Will it be the Gazes or the Blixes people? Will it be the transsexuals? Will it be the Jews or the Muslims? Nope. Turns out it's Ukraine. I didn't mention that either. Nobody's mentioning that. That's not a thing. But yeah, all of you every creed, color, and sexual persuasion. You can all shut the fuck up and walk lockstep into the fires of the apocalypse because blue and yellow flag. Now get marching. I guess it's just a super ironic coincidence that this would happen under a president with so many financial interests in Ukraine. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this plays out. The Democrat Party has hoodwinked women into supporting them without question in every evil they've inflicted. But will the women stand for this? Do they love Ukraine as much as they love their own safety and protection? I'm pressing X with the turbo button toggled on. Remember, women, when they're protesting for women's rights and interests, can go ahead and storm the Capitol anytime they like. They can storm any place anytime they like because they have disposable income and all the time in the world. And you'll have more to explain away than just one woman in a MAGA hat with a bullet through her throat. You'll need to try and convince the world that all 200,000 thoughts marching on the White House in pussy hats somehow deserved the mass gassing they're going to receive at the hands of the National Guard. And we're going to have content all year to talk about, watching CNN and MSNBC trying to blame it all on men somehow. It's going to be bittersweet in all the best and worst ways. I'm gonna need some popcorn, and I'm gonna need to smother that popcorn in whiskey to get through this. I will love it and I will hate it, and in the end, I will be indifferent to it because you brought this upon yourselves. I'm not normally a proponent of accelerationism, folks, but if that's where the chips lie, if that's what it takes to steer us out of the event horizon of this black hole, so be it. And fucking Chatelet. Honk.
There's a few things that need to be said about women in the draft. The first one is that fairness cannot be achieved by having a two-gender draft because men have been subject to it for, well, forever without any women being subject to it. So
even
let's see, how old is this country again? We're like couple hundred years though, so we need a couple hundred years of a female-only draft in order to actually make it fair. But if we're going to do that, we got to realize some other things. I mean, feminists have been telling us for a long time that girls mature faster than boys, so obviously the age should be dropped to 16. And while we're at it, we don't need, we've got this big to-do that's been going on in the military for several years regarding sexual violence. So to keep those 16-year-old girls safe, we clearly need all female brigades as well. They can't go in there with the men. They gotta go in by themselves. If they're gonna be boots on the ground, they're just gonna have to be women's boots. And obviously, that means that it's gonna be men running the computers and men back on the hospital ships and so on. Because why would we send them? Why would we send them out if it's the women that are going to be the boots on the ground? I mean, we really have to think this through. It's not enough. Like the Biden administration is just not feminist enough. I'm calling for a couple hundred years of an all-female draft, and men can still volunteer for the military. They can still voluntarily join if they want to, but they're not gonna be placed in combat zones unless they ask to be part of combat missions, and then they're gonna have to stay separate from the women and not do the same missions, so that the women cannot complain that they are being, overshadowed or dominated or assaulted or any of those things. Then they'll be much safer.
Yeah,
seems fair to me.
Well, I'm gonna take the patriarchal misogynist approach and say I don't think we should be drafting women. They're gonna get men killed. and there are jobs we could give them, I suppose, but yeah, they generally suck.
The draft doesn't necessarily mean being drafted into the infantry.
Right.
They can
it doesn't.
There's all kinds of jobs they can do. Like,
Yeah.
Dare I say nurses? That's going to get me some backlash. But they need nurses in the army. You know.
They do.
You know, they almost had a draft for female nurses in I want to say it's World War II. It might have been World War I. I might be wrong, but they didn't because they had enough enlistment. But the thing is, that's why I suggested, you know, women need to have their own units. They need to have their own own section of the military, and they're going to be the boots on the ground. They need to be boots someplace where the men are not also being forced to go.
And somebody's got to make the soldiers sandwiches so that they can like keep on fighting. And but at the end of the day,
he sounds like he's joking, but
yeah, I mean, men do need to eat.
They don't eat sandwiches; they get shit on a shingle.
They are called MREs.
Yes.
And
but
some of them will keep you constipated for a week.
Which is good because you only get like 1 square of toilet paper.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. But no, I mean, like it's not going to come out fair regardless, because we've just talked about that. We talked about, like, even if we draft women, they're not going to do the same jobs that men. They're not going to take the same risks. They're not going to be expected to. But more, and we've talked about the draft before, you know, I do think that it would be interesting to see if they add women to the draft, then what will women, like, are they going to accept that, or are they going to try and change that? Because I guarantee you they're probably going to try and change that. Even if, like, you know, they themselves are probably not going to get drafted because they're too old, overweight, whatever, but they're going to, like, feel like they need to fight against this, and it's gonna be framed as, you know, oppressive and patriarchal and shit. But what I find the most interesting about this is actually the trans thing. Now, it doesn't surprise me, but as much as our military, our U.S. military, has been trying to virtue signal about trans people in the military, especially since 2020, basically, as much as they've been talking about how progressive their military is, they seem to, all of that goes out the window when it comes to the draft. Like, it doesn't exist. So if you're a man and you think I'll just, you know, become like the guy from MASH and just live as a woman and they'll have to kick me out, no, it's not gonna happen. You're gonna be registered, you're going to be given a uniform, and you're going to be fighting just like everybody else. Yeah, Klinger.
We're back under Vietnam rules, although that was supposed to be portraying the Korean War. It very much portrayed things as they wanted people to see Vietnam. And that, you know, during the Vietnam conflict, the rules on who could be in the military changed, because they were having trouble finding enough people, and that included, like, what kind of crimes could you commit and still be in the military. And in fact, they started offering people absolution, essentially, if they would just go over and kill some enemies. So this will change. Everything will change depending on what suits the authoritarians.
Yeah, of course. Right. Exactly. Like, this is what I'm getting at, is that all of this rhetoric about, you know, being trans inclusive, etc., it's all bullshit. Like, we knew that from the beginning, because they were never not going to count biological males as biological males for the purposes of drafting them into the military. There was no way. So, like, when I heard this, I had to laugh, because it's like they're clearly lying about their, you know, like, beliefs about gender as a social construct and, you know, trans lives and all of that. As long as those lives were born male, they have just as much and the same utility that a male that was, drafted or signed up, has. There's no more or less. And so then I ask myself, why do they do that? Like, why even promote this? And I think it's to perhaps, like, as an ad, to get some trans people to sign up willingly. I don't know why. And I mean, maybe because they'd be useful as warm bodies to essentially get, shredded up by machine gun fire. But it seems like the whole thing about trans life, it doesn't matter. So, all that out the window completely. You're a man, you need to sign up because you're a man. This is exactly the same thing that happened in the Ukraine when, like, there were, Ukraine was talking about how pro-trans it is and how pro-LGBT it is. And, the government was just talking about how progressive they are and everything. And then it was time to draft people, and they just drafted all the men. Like, from this age up, I don't care how you identify. It doesn't matter. Here's a rifle. Go fight for this country. And all of a sudden, the privilege of being female, it's all gone. And I mean, if you're actually female, I think that in many cases, unless you're like, no, in general, women are going to be able to avoid the draft. Like, even if you have one, they could just get pregnant and then, So I don't think that that's actually going to affect it. It's not going to be equal. And I think that the solution to the problem of the draft, it needs to be looked at in a new way. But not like trying to alter the rules to draft both genders, because that's not going to work. And obviously the trans thing is just like out the window. So those are my thoughts.
Well, Nixon tried to get rid of it. He and Ford, if I remember right, was the one that actually went ahead with his policy. And Carter reinstated it. So, like, this is the draft is largely an authoritarian, progressive gig, and it exists only to force people to fight in wars that they don't support. Yeah. If our country was genuinely under attack, if there were invaders coming here, we would not need a draft. We would just have people standing up and fighting. And honestly, if we wanted to be ready for something like that, a draft is not the way to do it. The way to do it is to replace phys ed in every school across the country from junior high on up with a age-appropriate version of ROTC. Like something like the college kids do. And, you could still have days where they do silly things like square dancing and stuff like that, or learn the rules of basketball and field hockey and stuff like we did when we were kids. But if every student that could participate in gym class actually had PT training and actually learned, combat skills, actually learned how to handle weapons, and actually learned how to be careful with them, and to understand mortality, value life, and be prepared to defend theirs, you would eliminate a bunch of problems, including like, nobody's going to want to attack a school if all the students there know how to defend themselves, right? Mm-hmm. Even not one of the other students would want to do that. Like, they'd all be ready, and that student would be screwed. But then again, if somebody were to invade the country after a few years of that taking place, you would have a whole hell of a lot of young people ready to stand up and say, "You're not taking my family's home." So I think that would be way better. But our country's never going to do that because we have too big of an anti-gun movement, and they're too busy scaring the shit out of everybody, and they're too busy telling everybody that the students would just all shoot each other, and that would be it. So I don't know. In some ways we're kind of fucked, and probably the most likely thing that's going to happen is that the draft is going to continue in the status quo.
It's probably Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. Although I do think the only real solution is to get rid of it altogether.
Yeah. It's the only right solution.
Yeah, but then men and women, well, actually, our country as a nation needs to, it needs to love itself again, so that if there is an invasion, people feel like at least inspired to protect their home and their neighbors and their community. So that there needs to be a cultural move too, like away from all of this nihilism and pessimism. And then you'll have people fighting for something they care about, right? Like fighting for the Shire, as it were. And I don't believe that a draft is necessary to do that, because like most likely the people you're drafting are people who don't want to do it. But what that means though is that we need people that want to do that, that are willing to defend their homes, and and that's really all we need to worry about, because like I don't think America should be involved in other countries' business myself, unless like we know for sure that something that affects some other country will affect us in some other way. But again, it should be people's choice. And I think that if we had what would you call it, a volunteer army or whatever, where people, when they hear about a conflict and they want to help, they'll just go join up
when
and fight.
People enlist because they want they want to be in the military because it's family tradition, or they feel they want to be prepared to defend their country, or because the military offers them incentives that make it worth their while.
Yeah, those are all good reasons. And I think that it's sort of like the difference between how Americans felt about the World War II, maybe even if they were to some degree maybe propagandized, but they wanted to fight in that war, and most people believe that was the right move. And then you compare that to, say, like one of the like the weapons of mass destruction thing, right? Like that, people didn't like that war. I was going to say Vietnam, but I don't think that that's really entirely true. But I do think that the Middle Eastern conflicts were, there were a number of people that didn't like those. Like they let the bad taste in their mouth. Like they're like, well, are we the baddies? So and if again, like if it's a choice, then I think that people will generally, before they risk their lives, they'll do their research and figure out like what's the right course of action. And I think that people can be trusted. So, all right. Anyway, we're going to move on to the next story. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Like I said, for me, the most interesting thing is that men are going to get drafted no matter what. It doesn't matter how you identify. Of course it doesn't, right? That should be obvious. And what do you guys think about the draft? And I know we've talked about this a number of times, but is it really equal, even if we did draft women too? So let us know in the comments. All right, we're going to move on to the next story. This one is kind of funny. Pramelia Patton, UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, claims that Russia is providing their soldiers Viagra, also known as rape pills, to sexually assault Ukrainian civilians. So
damn.
So
I didn't know the Ukrainians were that ugly.
Yeah, so
knew that joke was in there.
They're giving Russian soldiers supposedly Viagra, and it just turns them into rape monsters, and they just this is what Viagra does. As cited by the New York Post,
turns them into the Incredible Bulk.
Yeah, as cited by the New
GIF.
York. The GIF.
If you know the GIF, you know what I'm talking about. I will say no more.
As cited by the New York Post, when you hear women testify about Russian soldiers equipped with Viagra, it's clearly a military strategy, Pramelia Patton told the AFP. Patton added that the UN has verified, quote, more than 100 cases, end quote, of rape or sexual assault since the invasion began in February. Victims have largely included girls and women, but boys and men have been raped too.
I have some serious doubts here. Like this is
no,
you reckon?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to share another little bit of info at the end of this that I think makes it even funnier. But all right, reported cases are only the tip of the iceberg, Patton told the AFP, but added that it is difficult to maintain accurate statistics during an active violent conflict. Yeah, with all this raping going on. The numbers will never reflect reality because sexual violence is a silent crime.
What about when you're yelling no and stop? How silent is that?
You know what? I don't know. And also, this is the thing that I thought was really funny and why I chose this story. In 2011, so like what, 12 years ago almost, probably. Reuters used the exact same narrative about Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi giving his soldiers Viagra so that they would go out and engage in mass rape.
Yeah, is that the extra information you were going to add on the end?
There's more. There's more because that narrative was used in Afghanistan. That narrative was used in Iraq. That narrative was used in Vietnam. That narrative was used in Korea. That narrative was used in World War II. That narrative was used in World War I. It was probably used prior to that.
I'm sure if we went to the Revolutionary War, they were like distributing flyers from the king saying that
they're gonna rape our women.
The colonist terrorists all passing around root of mandrake.
It works more than any other kind of warmongering. Weirdly enough, and I'm gonna all right. If your kids are listening to this, folks, for the love of God, send them away if you haven't already. Do it now, okay? So, none of this makes sense, does it? As a thing that would actually happen, it makes zero sense. If you want to strike fear into the hearts of your enemies, all right, I suppose the notion that your women are getting raped is maybe the worst thing that can happen to your tribe in such a relentlessly gynocentric world. Anyway, it's worse than your men getting murdered. It's worse than your children getting murdered. Hell, it's worse than your women getting murdered. Lord knows rape is worse than murder, right? But why wouldn't you just sexually assault them with a stick or something? I'm guessing it's a lot cheaper than providing an ongoing course of pills to a multitude of men over and over again. All you need is a hefty and perhaps girthy stick made of wood. You can use it over and over again. Or just use the end of a rifle. You've already got that shit to hand. Loads of them. Use the butt end if need be. Use the same one over and over without washing it. Isn't that enough of a chilling message to send to the enemy? Our women are being reportedly and repeatedly pegged by a wet log. Think of the lacerations. We must surrender immediately. I guess the only difference is that they can get impregnated from a Viagra-infused dick. Perhaps the sheer violence of stick rape isn't as bad as the confounding factor that your women are being impregnated by the enemy, or perhaps being given venereal diseases by the enemy. But have you spotted the other edge of the sword there? Your soldiers could be getting venereal diseases from the women they're raping. Is it worth losing a contingent of soldiers to a slow, debilitating knob rot when you could just fuck them with a stick? Or hey, just do it the traditional way and kill the women and children with a good old-fashioned bullet to the back of the head. It's fantasy. If your enemy is gynocentric enough to resort to that kind of tactic, ask yourself, is your own culture gynocentric enough to make up a lie along these lines? And I would put it to you that it is. It's not for the sake of the female fantasy. That's, to be brutally honest, that's only going to make women want This is only going to make them wet at the idea of being gang raped by a troop of burly Russian men. This is for the sake of men's nightmare fantasies. I mean, gynocentric men. Dare I say feminist men, who would rather watch their women die than even countenance the notion that some dude they don't like is making their women come like a freight train and get a good night's sleep for the first time in their lives. This is sick in like 5 dimensions. Anyone falling for this bullshit needs their head checked. You have to wonder how many wars have been waged over this, over men's insecurity about their women. It's quite the contrast to the previous story, but hey, chaos is as chaos does. Finding the ordered pattern among all this chaos is going from difficult to impossible. I can barely see straight myself. I need a wank. Excuse me.
You know, it would be feminist men that would buy into the notion that all it takes to turn an ordinary guy into a rapist is to give him an erection lasting 4 hours or more. Gotta do something with it.
Yeah. Well, does anyone else have any thoughts on this story? I don't think I have anything else to add. It's just
to suggest that for more information on what I said in regard to that that history of exploiting the idea of rape as a scare tactic in wartime. Allison and Karen and I did a talk at a university in Canada. I can't for the life of me remember what the name of the university was now, but she did a presentation that I think is on YouTube. It might be part of her threat narrative series because it sounds like something that she would have made part of her threat narrative series. But I would look at her YouTube channel, Typhon Blue, and see if you can find it, because it really does go back through history. That it's been used pretty much forever to get men riled up. This threat that the enemy is using, specifically rape of women, as a weapon of war against our people.
Also, I hate the United Nations, and I wish that we didn't give them as much credibility as we do. I don't think it's deserved. Fuck them.
It's not.
No, of course not. No.
They aren't necessarily the devil, but they are what Christians warned us about the devil might be.
Yeah. So anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. This is, it's a big one because of what it is about narratively. And yeah, these people are fucking scum. So let me see if I got any super chats. It's been kind of quiet today. Not a lot of super chats. What's going on, guys? You guys don't really. I mean, if you can't, you can't. It's okay. Like, I'm gonna get upset about that. But all right, well, we do have some super chows. So Meredith G gives us $5 and says, the strange things about authoritarians is they want the public to not take independent responsibility for their own defense and safety, but they need an army to impose its will. Yes. The Great Indoors gives us $5 and says, apart from having the problem with drafting women, that is an ill-defined demographic. If it succeeds, it would probably cause a sudden spike in the current 1.5 birth rate statistic. It could be a way to get women to go and make some fucking babies. So that, we can...
Actually, that pans out because currently the military has an issue with women being, suddenly becoming pregnant when they are activated for any kind of military conflict.
Of course. So thank you guys for that. That may work out karmically. Who knows? And for those of you guys watching, let us know what you guys think about that story in the comment section. We're going to move on to the next one. Yeah, this is another kind of weird story. to put it up on screen. All right. At least 269 public educators were arrested on child sex related crimes in the United States in the first 9 months of this year. So 269 public educators arrested for child sex crimes in the first 9 months, so basically since the beginning of the year. Of the 269 educators, including 4 principals, 2 assistant principals, 226 teachers, 20 teachers' aides, and 17 substitute teachers, at least 199 of those arrests, or 74% of those arrests, involved alleged crimes against students. This is according to an analysis conducted by Fox News Digital that only included arrests that were publicized. Those that were not counted in the analysis, those that were not publicized were not counted in the analysis, right? Meaning the true number may well be higher. Men also make up the vast majority with over 80% of the arrests. But there are an estimated 3.2 million public school teachers in the country, meaning the arrests compiled by Fox News Digital only make up 0.0084%. From the Fox News article, quote, "The number of teachers arrested for child sex abuse is just the tip of the iceberg. Much as it was for the Catholic Church prior to widespread exposure and investigation in the early 2000s, Christopher Rufo, a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, said in a statement to Fox News Digital, the best available academic research published by the Department of Education suggests that nearly 10% of public school students suffer from physical abuse between kindergarten and the 12th grade. According to that research, the scale of sexual abuse in the public schools is nearly 100 times greater than that of the Catholic Church," he said. The question for critics who seek to downplay the extent of public school sexual abuse is this: how many arrests need to happen before you consider it a problem? How many children need to be sexually abused by teachers before you consider it a crisis? End quote.
Exactly. And like Catholic priests fuck children because they're not allowed to fuck women. And that's certainly not an excuse for their behavior, but it is an explanation, at least an avenue of possible explanation. School teachers can fuck anyone they like, but they still fuck children. There's no excuse, and there's barely even an explanation for that, other than they can get away with anything. When people can get away with anything, it's only a matter of time before they do anything. As such, I do not buy this sort of implied finding that 80% of the culprits are male. As was indicated, that's only according to the cases that have been publicized. By and large, male teachers don't get away with anything. They have this sword of Damocles hanging over them at all times, even if they're perfectly innocent and all they want to do is teach. Male teachers are made examples of at every available opportunity, at least by the school boards themselves. Female teachers who take sexual advantage of children are not made examples of, because that might open the floodgates to the sheer extent of the problem. They are highlighted by folks like us. It seems every other week we do another story about a female teacher who's been serially raping children. Female teachers who take, and we do it via the news outlets who frame the situation under the usual language. She seduced the students. She had affairs with the students. She had relations with the students that are technically frowned upon by the school boards, so they had to be let go and relinquished begrudgingly to the police. But we promise you, this was a once-in-a-lifetime slip-up. Please don't investigate us. Most of our teachers are saints and angels who would never do anything wrong. And yeah, there's your red flag. There's your absence of accountability, Graham Norton. Women can get away with anything, and so they do. And if men want to get away with anything, all they have to do is be a woman. a feat increasingly easy and elementary as the world descends into this madness. I give up.
But you have made pretty much most of the points I would make, and that is, how would we know if men were 80%? The biggest thing that bothers me about this is they had to emphasize that most of them were men, but we didn't look at everything. We didn't look at the ones that don't get publicized. Like, if you're going to emphasize a gender, then you should have a more complete picture. And even, but you have to realize Fox News doesn't use the term rape necessarily when the perpetrator is female either. And our local media, where I live, doesn't either. There's been a few teachers from different suburbs that have actually had their criminal actions publicized in the newspaper. And it's always inappropriate sexual contact. If when they say inappropriate sexual contact, they're talking about a woman and not a man. If they were talking about a man, they would say rape, they would say molestation, they would say gross sexual imposition, they would say statutory rape, groping, blah, blah, blah. But not when it's a woman. Because they don't take women seriously. Women's actions don't matter. Women can't do harm. And by the way, what are you complaining about? Nice. And yet we're expected to trust these people with our children's sex education. And how dare you question what they're doing? And don't call it grooming, because there's nothing untoward going on in the school system. Like rape.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I've got
go ahead.
I've got a really easy way to solve this entire problem. Are you ready? I'm gonna say something that's gonna freak a bunch of people out. Abolish public schools.
I like that idea.
Yeah, that does sound like a decent idea. Although
encourage homeschooling, and then let's get some honest statistics on how the homeschool kids develop as opposed to how the public school kids develop. Let's just see who works out better. I have my predictions.
I like the cooperative homeschooling that a lot of parents do now, where if you've got one parent who just happens to be in a profession that makes them an expert at math, and they're good at teaching, the kids all get together and go to their house for math class, and if you've got one parent that happens to really be into physical fitness, the kids all go to their house for gym class. I think that's very effective, and the parents know each other. They're not sending them off to somebody that, well, you have to accept that this person is benevolent and qualified because they have a certificate. No, they actually are going to an individual's home that is known to the parents, and that the parents may also be there as well. They may even be helping to prepare the snacks or the materials or whatever. And I've seen that it's one of the few things that my husband's ex-wife did that I thought was a really great thing and really agreed with. And the kids really, when they did go back to the public school system, they were ahead. They ended up skipping grades because the material that they had been learning at home through this cooperative homeschooling group of parents was beyond what the school was teaching them. There were things that were beyond the school curriculum entirely, and then there were things that were just advanced. So it really is better.
Mm-hmm.
It's pod learning is what I've heard it called.
Yeah.
Basically, you have something like, I think, bare minimum 5 families, or up to, I think, as many as 20 or so. And you set it up where one parent has the students, or maybe 2 parents have the students for a day, and they will teach them whatever they have to that day, and then you rotate out, and that way you're getting a fresh new teacher each time, who's someone who knows the parents, or someone who knows the kids and knows everyone else, and you don't have a ton of students, that way, you can at least have a little bit of time with each one to get them better acclimated to learning. Because let's face it, one teacher per like 50 students, there's no way that's going to be a good learning environment ever.
Yeah.
Well, and there's another thing too. Over the years, the worst of parents have taken away from the school system and specifically from good teachers the ability to get students to cut out knucklehead behavior, by using a combination of rewards and discipline that works for that student. Now, if you upset the student by using discipline, even if it's you broke this item, you have to stay after school and help repair it, or you have to write 100 sentences or detention, even if it's not corporal punishment, parents are showing up and going after teachers for that. And it eliminates those teachers from the school system and leaves behind the teachers that are not keeping discipline in their classroom, and where students may be in danger from the percentage of teachers that are sexually violent in school systems like the one here in Dayton, the actual Dayton public schools, not necessarily all the suburbs, where the students are in danger. A lot of times they're in danger from other students being too poorly supervised to prevent things like gang violence and personal conflicts spilling over into the classroom and things like that. And you have kids getting severely injured, kids getting traumatized, there's been instances where kids have been killed at school by other kids, even when there hasn't been a school shooting. There's just a shitload of reasons why it really is better for kids to be in a more personal environment than a classroom full of 30 to 50 kids.
Yeah. I was just gonna add though, so we were talking about getting kids out of public schools and shutting down public schools completely, and I'm inclined to agree with it, but there is something else that people should know. Charter schools, private schools, even Catholic schools, they are all woke. Like it's not something, it may have like less of a predatory element in it, maybe, although I don't know because I don't think that there's enough data, but I do know that in terms of like their education style, it all comes from the same place. So they've basically made it uniform, but that means that it all operates under this like Freirean model. And you could watch James Lindsay's done a series of podcasts on it, and he said that it doesn't matter if you go to private school, if you go to charter school, if you go to public school, if it, whatever, right? Your child is gonna get indoctrinated the same way. And this is why homeschooling and maybe like doing it within your community or working with some, like independent curriculum that doesn't take its marching orders from the public and various private school systems is going to be your best bet. And what that ultimately means, and I know this is like really hard for people to hear, is that there is going to have to be a parent at home teaching their children. I mean, there's no other way, because we put so much faith and trust in these other school systems that they have essentially like they're controlling our kids. They are teaching them their values. They're pushing it on them, and that's not good, because you're gonna have to fight with that programming, because it's designed to make those kids turn against their parents, and they will probably like as early as 12 years old, not earlier. So, and it's like I said, it's not just the public school system; it's every school system. So just know that that's going on.
They're all modeled the same way. I mean, you have students sitting in a classroom getting a lecture from the teacher, and then they do homework. And that's why they're all susceptible to the same problems.
Well, and it's also if the Freirean model of it's like Freirean pedagogy or something. It's designed not to educate children, but to turn them into activists. And it's in all schooling. It's not just public schools. Public school is probably where it's worst, but it's not exclusive to that. So you have to, I think that you have to get involved. Maybe you can't homeschool yourself, fine. But you should be holding, wherever you sent your kid, you should be holding those teachers to account and make sure that they don't try that shit with your kids. So, but I just thought I would let you know it's not just a problem in public schools. Essentially, that's what I'm saying. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this story before we move on? All right. Still no super chats. Let me see if there's any shows. Check them really quick. Nope. All right. So let's move on to the final story. And Mike J, this one's for you.
Boy, aren't you glad we're done talking about the insanity of public schools, Brian?
Yes, I am.
So anyway, in the culmination of a bizarre series of events, an East Chicago grade school teacher is in police custody after informing a student that she had a hit list.
Okay.
Let that one hang for a second.
This is not to be confused with the dean's list. It definitely is not the same.
No, not
thing.
Quite. A little different.
25-year-old Angelica Carrasquillo Torres, a fifth grade teacher working at St. Stanislaus Grade School, reportedly mentioned to one of her students that she had a kill list. This list supposedly contained names of students, teachers, and other staff members, and she wanted to let that student know that they were also on this list.
Whoa.
The student would eventually approach their guidance counselor and mention Carrasquillo Torres and her kill list. Carrasquillo Torres was immediately escorted to the principal's office. Wait, what?
Yeah. She was
they didn't call the cops on her right then.
Yeah, they wanted to confirm.
This is what you do to a misbehaving student, not a teacher.
Well, actually, if a student misbehaved in that specific manner, they would still call the cops. There would be no principal's office visit. There would be, a SWAT team coming in and grabbing the student out of class.
Well, they probably brought her into the office because maybe they thought the student could be lying. And so we should.
Yeah, they probably thought the student was lying.
Yeah.
Buckle in, it gets weirder. Carrasquillo Torres was immediately escorted to the principal's office, where she admitted to having and discussing a kill list. The school's principal then told Carrasquillo Torres to leave the school and wait for an investigation to be over before returning. 4 entire hours after she left the school, the police were finally contacted concerning the situation. Carrasquillo Torres was later taken into custody without incident. The school decided to inform the parents of the situation by sending them an email, but some parents claimed the school did not do enough. Kirsten Saldivar, who has a child that attends the school, stated, quote, "The original email that we received last night had no information of what was going on other than there was an issue in a specific classroom. We knew nothing, and we went on about our normal school days like nothing was wrong," end quote. The school maintains that they handled the situation properly and blame any anger from parents on misinformation. The police investigation into the incident is still ongoing.
It's always misinformation, isn't it? All right, I have to say, in light of what we talked about in the last story and throughout this stream, really, relatively speaking, it seems like a little bit of a nothing burger. I think it's quite common to have, a naughty list, a list of people who, in theory, would be first against the proverbial wall, theoretically. Is there anyone listening who couldn't think of their own list, starting with a series of politicians, headlined by Joe Biden or Vladimir Putin? Whatever's your poison, it's fine. We all have that list in our head. This teacher's mistake was actually writing it down and including people in her own professional life on that list, which does indeed show a lack of tact and foresight into the consequences of what can happen. Again, this is a result of female teachers not quite having a sense of consequences. They've never grown up from when they were children in those very same schools, making lists of who they would fuck, who they would marry, and who they would kill. It doesn't surprise me that female teachers would make their decisions based on those folded paper doohickeys that they scooch around into triangular sections that predict the future. Think of the power. and yes, it sucks that we basically have schoolgirls in the position of school teachers. But honestly, I will take it. As long as they're not fucking the students, I consider that a small mercy. Punish them accordingly, and by that I mean take them aside and tell them to fucking grow up a bit. And thank your lucky stars that they're not raping children and ruining the development of those children, ruining their brains and turning them into future rapists who will go on to perpetuate this generational damage for as long as we still have sexually fertile people present in society. Because the alternative to that is a future in which there are no sexually fertile people left in society, due to our total conversion to neutered, puberty-blocked genetic freaks, which frankly is even worse, because that's literally the end of humanity. The most humiliating possible end to our legacy, which will confuse the fuck out of the aliens who eventually find the embers of our civilization. So, yeah, I'm fine with kill lists, to be honest. I'm even fine with fuck lists. Just don't fuck the kids. Okay, can we start there? I don't want you kiddie fuckers in schools at all, but if we're going to start somewhere, let's start by getting rid of the teachers who actually fuck the kids. Then we can work on the teachers who fantasize about fucking the kids. Then we can work on disciplining the teachers who fantasize about killing the kids. I realized I talked earlier about how raping people is somehow considered worse than killing people, but it's kids understand killing. They don't understand raping. When you die in Super Mario, I say die, you die in Super Mario and you go, oh man, that turtle killed me. And that sounds dark when you say it like that, when you really think about it. But kids can separate figurative killing from literal killing from a very early age. They understand the difference. They don't understand the difference between being raped by a woman and being seduced by a woman, because they're not taught that ever, like even long into their adult lives. So yes, raping children is worse than talking about killing children. Weird, I know, and I'm sorry if I offended anyone. But you get what I'm saying.
Well, to be honest, I mean, an easy way for a teacher to get around all of this is to just not take the S off of her shit list. Right? She can say you're on my shit list. Teachers have been telling kids you're on my shit list for forever. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, students should know if their behavior is so bad that it's persuaded the teacher to not like them very much. That's not a bad thing for kids to be able to understand. That's important for kids to be able to understand, because they're going to have to deal with people in authority their whole lives, right? So for them to not be able to understand that bad behavior makes them unlikable, that's a problem, right? But they ought to be able to. You ought to be able to admit that the kids are unlikable without creating a hit list. And frankly, I think if this had been, in particular a male student, right, then there would have been all hell would have broken loose. Oh my gosh, this kid has a hit list. And like I said, they would have pulled this kid out. SWAT team would have come in and pulled this kid out. And like, even at my son's school, there was an incident. I didn't learn about it till after the fact either. I was kind of mad, like really livid at first. And then I realized from the description that it happened so fast, they would not have been able to notify the parents in the middle of it, because the middle of it was 5 minutes long. And that was basically, the kid had said some things to friends before school that, something's going to happen. I'm going to do something. I'm really mad, to paraphrase. And I've brought something with me to take care of you all. And if I go to the restroom, you better hide, that kind of language. And so when he went to the restroom, his friends went to the teacher and said, he's going to go get, what he said he was going to go get. And he's threatening to go after everybody in the school with it. And it was literally, now granted, my son's school was across the street from a police station, like literally across the street. It's right there. When you leave the parking lot, you're facing the police station. You can drive straight from the driveway exit from the school parking lot into the driveway exit from to the police station across the street. And they were there instantly. Like as soon as they were called, they were in there. They showed up. They went straight into the restroom, there was already there were a couple of teachers detaining the student. He was removed from the school. He was sent for psychiatric treatment. And then we didn't get an email. We got a call. We had a system that would call everybody for various announcements, and it went out on that. And the first thing they said was that everything is okay. It's been taken care of. No students were harmed. This is what happened. Before we even knew what we would have been worrying about harm with. So the school handled this in a variety of bad ways. The parents should have been informed sooner. An email is a really lousy way to inform the parents. The teacher should have been handled by the police. This is not something that you can just not take seriously, especially in today's environment where we are seeing a situation of repeat violence in schools by people who are malcontents. And contrary to popular belief, it is not a strictly male behavior, nor a strictly student behavior. And it's not strictly recent either. So, I don't know. I do agree that there is a bigger problem with sexual violence. It's a much more frequent occurrence, and it's unfortunately much more condoned, especially when women do it. But there should have been much quicker response to this, and a much more serious one. And thanks a lot, feminists, for teaching people to not take women seriously. At least in this instance, she was reasonable enough to leave, and it wasn't somebody who actually had 3 or 4 guns and a shitload of ammo in her car. Because it could have been, and it would have gone down very differently if it had been. Just being female doesn't change that. And it's the officials at that school are really lucky that they made that mistake with somebody that they actually could order around. That's it. I mean, what else can you say about that? Women can be violent, and if you doubt it, you make yourself vulnerable to the first woman that's going to be violent toward you.
Yeah, I mean, it's generally a good idea to take something that could be interpreted as a threat seriously, and you can do that without necessarily, getting too authoritarian while you sort of investigate, and then based on what you learn, try to act in a just and rational way.
Well, and at the very least, teachers should be subject to the same rules the students are when it comes to the response to violent threats.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or maybe even a slightly higher standard. Because they're sort of modeling behavior for students. So.
Yep.
All right. So does anyone else have any thoughts on this? Okay, so I got one super chat. I didn't get any super chows. Duncan Alexander gives us 45 ZAR, which I believe is like South African money. And he says it is the idea that school is the only way that pigeonholes people into public school. I know many people who found going back to school really hard. Yeah, I mean, well, it's one of these like publicly funded institutions that everyone just presumes is good. So, you hear this all the time. People all over the political spectrum will be like, what we need to do is, and then they'll say like, improve education. For example, right? Oh, here's how we'll help kids in education, education, education. And the truth is, like, our education system sucks. It does. Like, it's not the solution. It's actually part of the problem. So, we're gonna have to like let go of these ideas that these things that exist, which are products of the state, are automatically all good. And I'm not just saying that because I happen to be really skeptical of the state and generally don't think we need it. But no, even setting that aside, like, you have to look at, well, what good is this thing doing? And the education system, it's not doing much in the way of good. It just isn't. Like, even though, and it's kind of funny, girls do a lot better than boys in the education system. Like, they get like 60%, I think, higher marks, and they're more likely to graduate and go to high school, and they're more likely to graduate high school and go on to college, and they're more likely to graduate college, like, than boys, right? And basically, like, every metric. And what we do is, because we just think that the education system is flawless and that it's designed, it's perfect and it just produces winners, and there's nothing else going on. There's nothing, sketchy. There's no ideological programming happening or anything like that. Because we just assume that it's good, a net good, then that means that we must assume that when boys fail, it's their fault. Because we're not asking the appropriate questions like, what is education for? What should it be doing? Why isn't it accommodating the needs of boys? But no one wants to do that because they love education so much that they can't even fathom, going, you know what, maybe this system sucks. Maybe this all has to go. Maybe we need to be like educating our boys and girls in another way, And so I think that we have this love affair with education, and we have to like let it go. And I think that there's probably other, government things that we could let go of too. But I think we should at least start with criticizing education. So those are my thoughts on that. Okay, so I have a thank you for the super chat, Duncan. And let me just, no new super chows. So I guess we're gonna wrap it up here, which is pretty good because, kind of a short sausage, which I'm okay with. So I guess let us know your thoughts about any and or all of what we discussed. Oh, Duncan Alexander gives us another 45 ZAR and says, should the education system accommodate everyone equally? Personally, I don't think there should be an education system, but I know that we need something to sort of measure someone's educational progress. Should it accommodate everyone equally? No, I think it should accommodate everyone individually. I think that people have individual needs, they have individual strengths and weaknesses, and I think that a good education will do that. It will accommodate their weaknesses, and it will help them realize their strengths. And because, you don't, what knowledge have you guys gotten from public education, or even if you went to private school or whatever?
The mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah, like when you learn it, when you learn this piece of info, when have you ever said to yourself, well, when am I going to use this? And I think this is like, it's not that it's bad to have like general knowledge of things, but sometimes maybe people just need something that's going to help them do the one thing they want to do. Like if someone is going into, engineering, or if they're going into writing, or, maybe we should be focused on like their strengths. Maybe we should.
Or maybe we could do something practical, like teach them how to do taxes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The truth is that the education system was not created to provide students with knowledge that would be useful to them later in life.
Mm-hmm.
Like the public education system was created to provide employers with workers that would be useful to them later in life. That is it. It was to create a sort of standardized workforce. And we have all kinds of standardized things in education: standardized curriculum, standardized uniform or dress codes, standardized lunches, standardized testing, standardized, everything. But we don't have standardized kids. And as long as we don't have standardized kids, you can't accommodate everyone equally in a system like that. You end up accommodating the most common characteristics among kids, or the characteristics that are most desired among kids. But then when you get, kids who are a little smarter than expected, or a little less smart than expected, or they have a learning disability, they have, they're dyslexic, they have autism, they have, some sort of intellectual disability, they have a mental health condition, they've got stuff going on at home, like their parents are in gangs, they've got stuff going on home, like their parents have their own mental health addiction or other issues. Their parents are abusing each other. They don't have one of their parents, that kind of thing. You're not accommodating those students in a school system like we have today. Those are the students that fall through the cracks, that end up graduating with less than standard reading skills at the very best, or that end up bringing their grandfather's guns to school because they don't have the social skills that they need to be part of their school community, and they blame the other students for that. And they don't know how to not blame the other students for that, so they go after them with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
This is a problem that is unique to that environment, in that you literally have to accommodate people in a way that excludes most of them in order to actually run the environment. And it's not like that there aren't workplace shootings, but they're usually over serious workplace issues, or the individual shouldn't have been there in the first place. But the kids are supposed to be at the schools, at least that's what we're told. And the schools are supposed to be there to help the students, or at least that's what we're told. And it happens there anyway. It's like having somebody bomb your doctor's office because they got a diagnosis they didn't like. It's crazy. And you can't standardize a system to handle children and not expect to do damage to the children.
Yeah.
People should be treated equally, all things being equal. So in the very first year of school, when the kids are introduced, they should all be treated equally. But then once they're tested, you can determine the variance of advantage that each one has. Even when I was in the youngest classes, when we were only 30 students per class, they were able to separate people into maybe 4 different groups of how advanced they were at reading, how advanced they were at mathematics, and so on and so forth. And you could put them in various tiers of how advanced they were. Like some kids were onto Math Book 3, while some other kids were still on Math Book 1. and through that process, you could determine which kids were good at math, which kids were good at reading, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's like I say, all things being equal, start at equality, but it's not difficult to discover what different kids are good at, and so you guide those kids into what they're good at. It makes much more sense than just assuming every child is good at the same thing in equal measure, and they should all have fucking participation trophies for everything.
I was gonna add something, but I don't think it's necessary. You guys covered it. So Duncan Alexander, thank you for that super chat. I got another one from Duncan Alexander for $45 or 45 ZARs. And he says, I thought public schools were created so parents didn't have to deal with their kids during work hours during the Industrial Revolution. Well, I don't know. Depends on what you mean by Industrial Revolution, but I think that women were generally involved in the education of children for most of our history. And and I think even like through, the sort of 50s and 40s, because women were still stay-at-home mothers mostly, and they worked with people in their community. And I think, yes, children went to school, but the parents were involved heavily. So I think they were quite concerned with, what their child's learning and how they're doing, and they're being socialized constructively or whatever.
You also have to remember that at least at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, child labor was not illegal.
Yeah.
So
you could just put the kids to work.
Yeah, and I mean, when we talk child labor, a lot of people think of kids working in factories and stuff. In the days before there were laws regarding child labor, if your parents worked in a coal mine, you did too.
Mm-hmm.
And, if your parents had a bakery, you learned how to be a baker. If your parents, if your dad was I think it's called a cobbler, you learned his trade. And I might be wrong, but I'm thinking that was the person that put shoes on horses. Like all of that, whatever the trade was, you learned it. If your parents were pig farmers, you learned how to farm pigs, how to raise pigs. Mm-hmm. And that was the norm. And even now, like if your parents have a family business, a lot of kids will learn the family business, but you don't see kids going to work in the same place that their parents do now, because you can't. It's not legal anymore. So okay, it's farrier. I'm trying to remember now what a cobbler is, because cobbler actually wasn't just the person that laid down cobblestones. There was another name for that. And it's one of those things I should remember from school, because we learned it in conjunction with a joke in
a cobbler is someone who makes shoes, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Makes shoes. Okay, not for horses, just for people.
Shoes
then
for people. Yeah.
Okay.
Horseshoes, or that's a farrier.
Yeah. Yep. That's what one of the well, okay, it was TAP Price CTR or TA Price CTR pointed that out. But yeah, you learned, and I mean, my parents were photographers, and I learned photography. My parents were teachers, and I'm a nerd. So they're like, it's not something that's gone away completely, but I don't think that the government created the school system for parents. They created the school system for employers, and they did it not because they like employers. They did it because when employers pay people, those people pay taxes.
Yeah.
Remember when the good old days when if both your parents gave you an X gene, you went on to be a person with double X genes? Those days are long since gone. Now you can have whatever genes you like.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off of Hannah's point, one of the people that had the biggest shaping of the modern day education system was around the turn of the century with John D. Rockefeller.
Oh yeah.
He contributed something like over 100 million to create the General Education Board. And he wanted factory workers. He wanted people that were, not just country bumpkins to work for him, because they're often illiterate. They don't know how to work with other people. They're usually very independent. No. Want people that know how to read, know how to do basic math, know a little bit about kind of everything. Not a ton, not enough to be a specialist, but enough to, I know 2 sentences about that topic. And more importantly, people that can follow order. People that can recognize a hierarchy and where they fall in that hierarchy. That know when to show up on time and know that if they don't show up on time, they will be punished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's, where everything falls in, where, the order comes from. You're there when the bell rings. You're going to wear this uniform. You're going to have lunch at this time, not that time. Everyone eats at this time. Everyone goes to the bathroom at this time. Here's your your 30-minute break. And back to the factory lines, and now you get to clock out and go home.
Yep, that's true.
Kids are disorganized, chaotic, psychotic assholes, and whatever they're good at, they need to be taught to be organized, or they never will be.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for those comments. Duncan Alexander gives us another super chat for 45 ZAR, and he says, if your parents were coal miners, you open and close the shutter in the dark room from the age of about 5. Yep. All right. So fortunately, we don't live in that world right now. All right. So anyway, with all that said, if we're going to close out the show, go into the patron show. So please consider joining us by becoming a badger. That is going to feedthebadger.com and setting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into the Discord. And if you give it higher levels, you'll have more privileges. You'll at least be able to watch the stream that we're going to be doing, where we're going to be looking at this video from Steve Harvey's show on today's show. So please consider joining us on that. And, you can do that by going to Feed the Badger. So if you guys like this video, please smash like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on today's show regarding any and or all of the topics. And most importantly, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.